the women's movement was overwhelmingly white. It was the women's movement, like SDS, like all the movements, college educated. But this was not Williams and Yale and Wellesley. It was the University of Washington. Also, the women's movement emerges in the late 60s, and in the late 60s is also the high point of what's called the Black Power movement and the Black freedom struggle. And at that particular moment in time, especially after the assassination of King, the Black movement says to whites, we don't want to work with you. I mean, CORE kicks whites out in 1965. I was kicked out of Brooklyn CORE. But it was the idea of Black power. That is, Black people needed to work with Black people to organize and so forth. And so Black activists told white activists, you've got to go into the white community and organize white people. And so it's not surprising that in the late 60s, the movements are very racially segregated, not because whites said we don't want Black people. It was because, and I'm not saying that Blacks were segregating, but it was, they were self-segregating. And so at this particular moment in time, when we women were thinking about women's liberation, it was not propitious. It was the historic moment wasn't there where white and Black women could really work together easily. And Black feminists and Black activists have written over and over again about how if you were Black and a woman, you were viewed as a race traitor if you joined a women's movement, or you were a race traitor if you called yourself a feminist. Yet this myth begins to perpetuate that the women's movement was white and it was racist. Now, were many of us racially insensitive and what have you? Absolutely. We didn't have a language. There was no foundation. We couldn't look back to our sisters from the 30s because there was no women's movement in the 30s. So there was no legacy, no sort of foundation that we could build on. But there's no question about it, in my opinion, that one, we tried to create coalitions with women from the Black Panther Party. We certainly worked with women in the farm workers, the FARA boycott, Indian rights women. I mean, I would never say the groups were racially integrated, but when you had an International Women's Day event, you know, it was a coalition of groups. And I think it was not until the emergence of Black feminism in the mid-70s that then things begin to take a different turn.